We okay? This meeting is resumed. City Council has not completed its closed session. Consideration of AU 9.12 Auditor General's observations of a land acquisition at Finch Avenue West and Arrow Road by the Toronto Parking Authority. I will ask for a motion to meet in a further closed session later today. Okay, so we'll go to the two timed items that Councillor Mammoliti had moved earlier. And the first one is on page 3, T 24.72, traffic control signals at Richmond Street and Simcoe Street. Do we have any questions?
Richmond and Simcoe.
Okay, so Councillor Cressy.
Recorded vote.
Okay, please, Councillor Carroll. You don't have to tell me to ring the bells. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, recorded vote. We're voting on page 3, TE 24.72, traffic control signals.
Councillor Mammoliti, please. Councillor DiCiano and Councillor Crawford, please. Okay, Robinson is gone.
Councillor Lee, your vote, please.
That's my side right now. Mine too.
The item is adopted 33-2.
Our next item that was timed is on page 10. Members' motion MM 31.1. Councillor Matlow held it down. Councillor Mammoliti had an intro. Do we have questions to staff? Okay. Councillor Mammoliti, questions to staff.
We have done something similar in the...
Councillor Bailao, please.
We've done similar similar approach in the past with the 1 cent gas recoup or gas going to our municipality. We've taken on a campaign that way, have we not?
To the city manager? Is that the question to the city manager?
I don't know who can answer it, but
I don't know.
I know that we've done it. I just want verification. You know.
It is my recollection that that's been undertaken, yes.
And was it successful? I think it was successful. The campaign, in your opinion, was successful as a city?
I don't think that my opinion is especially relevant on this, and I'm not in a position to say whether or not it was successful. I am in a position to say that the province did provide consideration to the council request.
Just consideration, or they actually gave us the 1 cent?
Along with other municipalities, yes.
Okay. All right. That's my question.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Matlow, do you want to speak on it? You held the item down. Councillor Matlow.
And then there's
yeah, Madam Speaker, colleagues, the priority, The item is,
On page 10, MM 31.1, members motion standing up together for Toronto. Okay, Councillor Matlow.
Madam Speaker, through you, colleagues, I strongly suggest that this is the time to get back to the table and work with both the provincial and the federal counterparts on funding our priorities. The transit files and the housing files are far too important to play games with. There are times when we need to challenge the other orders of government when we don't believe that they are fulfilling their role and their responsibilities and contributing their part. There are other times where we need to sit down and try to resolve differences and work as partners to be able to achieve results. This is that moment. I don't begrudge anyone who has said that they are concerned about the dearth of funding for some of our priorities. But this kind of action is a newsletter action. This is a newsletter action, led by Councillor Mamolini. This isn't helpful. What this does is that it just sends a signal that we want to go to war and get into a fight. So what does the province do? For example, we're waiting for more housing funds. We're waiting for the relief line announcement. Does this speed up those announcements? If you're at the Premier's office, if you're at the provincial government level, you see this approved by council, and then you see a big campaign going at you. You must do this right now because we are council and we say you must. Do you hold a press conference next week and make an announcement about housing funds or transit funds? When you look like you're actually capitulating to the demands of the city, telling you that you've got to do that right now? Is that even good politics? Never mind the right thing to do. I don't think it's helpful. So please do away with this. There are people.
Okay, just one sec, please. Councillor Davis, Councillor Crawford, how can we hear if everyone's talking? Please. Okay, go ahead.
I believe there are people at every order of government, both ours, along with the provincial government, along with the federal government, who totally and completely understand how deeply important funding affordable housing is. There is no doubt, and you know, I have strong differences about where both the city and the province has allocated many of the transit funds. Very strong differences of opinion. But I think it's inarguable that the province has contributed billions of dollars towards transit projects here in the city of Toronto. That's inarguable, it's just a fact. So let's bring down the temperature, let's get back to the table, and let's try to work out resolutions that will finally contribute to both expanding the transit priorities that we have along with the relief line, hopefully the waterfront ORT projects as well, and other projects that we deem necessary and urgent, and focus so importantly on the social housing stock, which is it's a priority to us all, every single one of us. But I just don't believe that sort of pushing it in this way is going to actually end up with the result that we want. I believe that there are partners at the provincial level who want to sit down and work with us. Let's focus on that first. Don't buy into this, please.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Speaker. And very briefly, I share with many of my colleagues frustration at not being able to attract the funding that we need from the province, but as well the funding that we need from the federal government. The mayor has, I thought, made a valiant attempt to bring our wish list to the attention of the other two orders of government, and to a degree, Speaker, and I agree with Councillor Matlow, the two other orders of government have been generous, but they haven't given us the amounts, frankly, that we need, that we require to implement a social housing and transit strategy in a strategic way. So we should continue working with them. This is a very rude, frankly, crude way of expressing ourselves to the other two orders of government, and I would have hoped that we would be a little more sophisticated in our approach than what you see on paper in front of us today.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you. I would really appreciate counselors and staff that are back here speaking. I cannot hear. Councillor Mamalidi to speak.
So you know, when I drummed up the motion, I wrote it up because there was a lot of discussion leading up to the motion here in the chamber that spoke to infrastructure money, that spoke to the lack of money from the province and the federal government. And there was a lot of talk about the mayor just trying to do this on his own. And even the mayor and I got into it at one point because we challenge these things on a regular basis. And the mayor was very clear to myself. He was clear to anybody that has spoken up on perhaps the lack of an attempt on getting money from the other levels of government, to say, well, you come up with the solution then. You decide what we should be debating in council together so it becomes a team effort. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to say that the City of Toronto, like we did with the gas tax, deserves a little bit more through a campaign. And I'm not suggesting how to run that campaign. I'm not doing that. I'm asking staff to come back and suggest it for us. So how do they see it? What do they think that we should do? And how similar can it be to the 1 cent tax campaign that we did? That's what my motion says. It says, let's do it as a team. Let's not do it just as the mayor going out and doing his best to get the money we need for the infrastructure money and housing, quite frankly. Housing is you know, as early as yesterday, we were talking about the need for how much money we need for housing, right? And now we've got an opportunity to take out a campaign that says City of Toronto wants the other levels of government to pitch in with respect to what's rightfully the City of Toronto's in the way of help, of money. And that's what we're trying to do here. So I don't know why there's an objection. We've done it before. I don't understand the logic. You know, they want to pick a fight. You know, if there's, this isn't about picking a fight. If there's an opportune time, Madam Speaker, to go after the level, especially the province, God, it's right now. There's an election looming at a provincial level. What better way to get money secured for the City of Toronto if you make it a City of Toronto initiative, so it's on every candidate's mind and in their objectives to get themselves elected at a provincial level. This would be the appropriate time to send the message on behalf of the City of Toronto. And the other thing it does is it helps the mayor. It's just not the mayor going out and saying the City of Toronto needs it. It's a full-blown campaign that says, endorsed by by council, that says we need to do this. Now, I don't anticipate we're going to spend a lot of money on this. I don't. We didn't with the 1 cent tax, and I don't anticipate we'll do it here. But let's wait and see what staff come back with to determine what kind of campaign we can do with very little money. What is wrong with that? I honestly don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, if my motion said that we want Councillor Mamalidi to get out there and we want him to go meet with the Premier, we want him to meet with all the ministers, then I can actually see you know, how some of you might have a reaction to this, because you may not want me you know, going to talk to them. It might hurt more than help. I don't know. But that's not what the motion says. It says, let staff come back and let staff determine what kind of a campaign it is. And let's help the mayor in this one. Let's say that we support him when he goes out and says we don't have the money to be able to do all of these things.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Although I like the initiative, I think that any message that we prepare and issue to the provincial government will largely fall on deaf ears, principally because we are in an election mode. This government has not demonstrated that it really cares about social housing, because social housing, quite frankly, doesn't get them votes. And their principal concern right now is getting votes. And we've seen that in some of the policy announcements with respect to the rolling back of hydro, with the increasing of the minimum wage, and with the intent to do an environmental assessment on a high-speed rail to Kitchener when all of the traffic is between here and Ottawa and Montreal. So although I applaud what Councillor Mammoliti is suggesting, the job really and the task, I think, really falls on councillors and on the mayor. And the mayor is doing the job of representing the city's interests with respect to the provincial needs. I don't think I want to see staff time devoted to a campaign that's going to try to convince a desperate Liberal government to start funneling more money or money to Toronto with this provincial campaign coming. And yes, Councillor Matlow did say that you know, they've provided lots of money for transit, and that certainly is true. But I mean, it's our money that they're spending. It's taxpayers' money that they're spending, and they should be investing in this in transit in Toronto and all across Ontario. So I think the intention is good. I'm not going to support it. I think the tactics are wrong, and I think the audience wouldn't be listening.
Sorry, what did you say, John?
Councillor de Bearmaker? No, he took his name off.
Thank you.
Councillor de Bearmaker?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm rising to simply stand and ask my colleagues to support the motion put forward by Councillor Mammoliti and Councillor Fragedakis. Sorry, Mary. Must be, I don't know what that, I must have just had peanut butter or something.
You could probably split the Bearmaker.
But certainly on my now 14th year into this, being a city councillor, I think our municipal government has run campaigns to ask the federal and provincial government for additional funding and for additional help since I was elected 14 years ago. So I don't see that there's anything nefarious. I don't see this as a poison pill. I don't see that this will be seen as an insult to the provincial government. In fact, I think the provincial or federal governments would actually be surprised if we weren't asking for money. I can't imagine a day when perhaps down in the Don Lands at the mouth of the Don River, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Premier of Ontario, and the Mayor of our city got together, and there were no demands from the City of Toronto. There were no requests for financial assistance or help in any way. I have found, while not every campaign has been successful, the 1 cent campaign, for example, we were given packages and emails and a media strategy. We were told to tweet things out and to send out email blasts. I was out in Calgary at a FCM conference handing out 1 cent now flyers to other municipal councillors across this nation. So to think that this request and this member's motion is somehow different than what we've done for the last decade and probably the decade before I got elected isn't really that unusual. When I look at the Transit City Plan for one of the transit cities under the Miller government, of which I was a member of, we started with no money. One of the criticisms of Adam Giambrone and Mayor Miller at the time was, you've got a plan and you've got no money. This is nothing but make-believe. This is a bunch of crayons and paper, and you've just created something and it has no relevancy whatsoever. but we did campaign. We did ask the provincial government for funding, and at one point, the provincial government agreed to give us $12 billion to fund that project. So you've got to start somewhere. Somewhere is when you've got nothing in your pockets and no money in your hand, but you say to another order of government that has the access to revenues that we don't, you know what? We think there are really important needs for the people of Toronto that complement the goals and objectives of the federal and provincial governments, and we think we should be partners. We should be doing this together. So the 1 cent campaign, for example, was never adopted by the federal government, but we did get more money from the federal government. We had the announcement of the Prime Minister, the Premier, and our Mayor down at the mouth of the Don River, saying that we're going to allocate some $1.2 billion to do an extraordinary project down in the Portlands. That started certainly before I got elected. So I would urge members of council to continue in the tradition of doing the job that we were elected to do, and that is to advocate for the people of Toronto to make sure that they get their fair share of the federal and provincial pots as we move forward building this great city of ours. So I would again encourage our members of council to support the recommendation, and let's march forward and see what we might get in terms of assistance from the federal and provincial governments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to say something I don't say very often in this chamber. Councillor Mammoliti is right.
Say it again.
Councillor Mammoliti is right.
Where is he?
So I think we should be doing this for a number of reasons. Firstly, Councillor Campbell is also correct that the Liberals are desperate because they see themselves on the wrong end of an election coming up. And this is the time to launch a campaign against them and to try and get as much money as we can out of that government. I would say this. Members in this chamber spend hours upon hours burning brain cells I wouldn't even begin to count, drafting all these motions, asking the provincial government to do this and asking the provincial government to do that. And then what do? We put it on the clerk's office to send a letter that the minister never reads, the Premier Wynne never reads. And we pat ourselves on the back for getting that through council. And pretty much we've wasted the time of this council, and we wasted the time of everybody who's been a part of it. We are now at a time, this time doesn't come along very often. It comes along once every 4 years or so.
No.
And if a government's on its way to re-election, then they will continue to not listen generally, or not listen as well to those cries for money that's desperately needed. But the City of Toronto is a place where this government desperately needs to win. And to win, they have to help the very residents that they want their support from. The problem that we have right now is they're not listening. And so we should do everything that we can to make them listen at the very time when they're motivated to listen the most. It's very easy to understand. They want to get, Liberals more than anything else, want to get reelected. And so now's the time to push them to give us the funding that we need to properly fund the programs and the infrastructure in the city. So that's why we should support this motion.
Thank you. Doctor, I was going to say doctor. Doctor. Councillor Karygiannis.
Call the question, Madam Speaker.
No, one name. The question's been called. We only have one more speaker. And the mayor wants to speak.
Councillor.
So there's only two more.
Councillor Fletcher, please, and Councillor Crisanti, when you're seated, please.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 11 to 23.
Councillor Perks.
Thank you very much. Out of respect to Councillor Karygiannis, I'll be quick. I'm afraid that I won't be able to support this motion, and I have a reason for that. Before I get to that reason, I want to talk a little bit about why this is different than the 1 cent now issue, because I think there's a critical difference in there that should inform how we think about the idea of us campaigning on another government spending money. The point of the 1 cent now campaign, it came just after the City of Toronto Act, and it was about trying to change the relationship entirely about how our governments work together. We were asking for a new taxation power. We were asking for the provincial government to give us the right to fill 1 cent of the tax room as a municipality. It was a fundamental change in the powers, financial and otherwise, in the City of Toronto. It was a new idea, very, very different than what we're considering now. What we're considering now is asking our staff to go away and write up a report on how we should be spending public money, telling the public about what another government, we think another government should do. One of the things Councillor Holyday is fond of saying, and it's unfortunate he's not in the room, is a lesson he learned from his dad, who many of us served with, is the one thing you don't want to do is collect public money to spend on a program that opposes another program funded by public money. You should never have public money fighting itself. It's a complete waste of a very scarce resource. Having two governments spending money on an air war, battling each other, funded by the very scarce and precious dollars that we're able to collect through taxes and fees, when we have real meaningful challenges that, as of yet, we're not sure we can fund, is, to my mind, the height of disrespect for the public purse and for good governance. Many of us disagree on how big government should be and what things government should do. But one thing I think we would all agree on is that we don't collect revenues for the sake of running propaganda wars against other orders of government. It's a really bad use of public money, but more than that, it contributes to the cynicism that people have about what governments do. We're all supposed to be representing people. We're not supposed to be thinking of ourselves as an independent entity going to war with another independent entity. We're both of us, the province and the federal government and the City of Toronto, all supposed to be serving the same people. They will look askance and lose faith in our role as stewards of this great city of ours and that public money if we throw it, just to pile up money to throw mud at another government. That's not representation. It's true we should articulate the interests of the City of Toronto, and I note the mayor's done that, and I congratulate him on that. It's important that we talk about whether or not the federal government has adequately come to the table on housing, whether the provincial government has adequately funded their share of the cost of transportation in this, the economic engine that drives the province. That's all fair to talk about in our roles as elected officials. What's different is levying money to spend on big campaigns, newspaper ads, and so on. That's a step too far. That's a misuse of a scarce resource, and that's why I won't be able to support Councillor Mammoliti's motion.
Thank you. Okay, the last speaker is Mayor Tory.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I begin by asking Councillor Perks, because I'm surprised at his remarks, but I think it maybe involves a misreading of the motion, because there actually is no authority sought here to spend any money. What we've asked in this motion, or what Councillor Mammoliti has asked, and I'm supportive of it, is for the city manager to go away and examine options for a campaign. And quite frankly, he could come back and tell us we could run a perfectly good campaign for no money. in the context of using social media effectively and things like that. And I'm surprised only in the sense that I would think that aside from the question of how you spend and whether you spend public money, I get that point, that the notion of running a campaign or exploring options for a campaign would be something you would support, because the main purpose of it is to advocate to the provincial government that we need their help for the most vulnerable people in our city, the tenants of Toronto community housing, where much as we have debates in here about whether we're putting enough up or we should put up 2 more, we did increase our funding by 18%. We have invested $1 billion of city money, and they have come to the table with paltry sums of money, almost bordering on zero, to help us with the repairs. And so I would urge you to reconsider your support, because it doesn't say we give authority to launch a campaign. It doesn't say we spend a penny or ask to spend a penny. It simply asks the city manager to explore options to run a campaign and make specific reference to social media, which could perhaps be used at no cost to the taxpayers. And frankly, I would say he could have his chance to vote against this at such time as it comes back and recommends the spending of any money, if it does. But I just want to make that point. It's clear that this does not ask for any money. With respect to the first speech that was made here by the councillor for Ward 22, through you, Madam Speaker, I would only say that he, and I think it was repeated subsequent to what he said, is that this is some kind of a campaign aimed at 2 levels of government. That's actually factually incorrect. It's aimed at 1, because you did say that. We could check the record if you wish. But the bottom line is that there's only one government that has not come to the table at all. And we can question the adequacy of what the federal government has come forward with, and there'll be more news in the next couple of days about what they're doing on phase 2 of their transit, the federal government that is. But the bottom line is, on transit, we're going to be receiving billions of new dollars from them. We've already received hundreds of millions, which allowed us to buy the buses that we bought. And on housing, we're going to receive substantial hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's hundreds of millions we would not have received were it not for their efforts. And guess how that happened? That happened as a result of a concentrated effort made by the big city mayors, of which I am one, and was proud to play a leadership role on behalf of this city and other cities across Canada, to relentlessly advocate to the federal government and all federal political parties during the period running up to the federal election we just went through. And I will tell the councillor for Ward 22 in particular, who is impliedly critical of my efforts in this regard by saying, well, there's more to be done sitting at a table. I have been to dozens of private meetings with the... Just let me speak. You had your turn. I've been to dozens of meetings with the Premier of Ontario. I've been to dozens of meetings with the ministers of the government. I've sat down with the caucus from the City of Toronto, the Liberal caucus from the City of Toronto. I have met with the minister.
Mayor, Councillor Matlow's getting up on a point of order.
The mayor is speaking for me, suggesting that I'm implying things. It's not all about the mayor. I wasn't talking about the mayor, and I asked that the mayor withdraw his comment.
Councillor Matlow, that's not a point of personal privilege.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Madam Speaker.
No,
the mayor just said that I was implying things about him and his intent and his motivation. I did not mention him, and I did not imply anything about him. I said collectively, we need to get back to the table. This is not about him or his oversensitivities at this point.
Councillor Matlow, please. When you spoke, you referenced the mayor.
And the mayor's entitled to his opinion.
Okay.
Sorry, there was no point...
Simply that the mayor refrain from characterizing my comments in any way that are untrue. I'm not alluding or implying things about him as a person. And I don't do that.
It's a request.
Okay, come. Mayor, can you continue, please?
Madam Speaker, the bottom line is, the member for Ward 22 may want to just concede and have us sit here in this council chamber after dozens of meetings have been held on all accounts. I don't know how many meetings he's had or others have had in here or letters they've written. I'd be interested in seeing the file. But having said all that, I need your help. I need your help. And all it is saying that we are exploring options to run a campaign. And there's 90 days before the report even comes back on those options. And in those 90 days, I'm actually very hopeful we can be invited to a table. We can be invited to a table. I've gone to the table, I would tell you if I said 50 times with different people, and I'm terribly sorry that I haven't been able as yet to have success in putting across a case that I think is so straightforward in terms of the need of the most vulnerable people in our city to have the help of a government that has the tools at its disposal. And we went forward with road tolls. We went forward with road tolls, and this council showed a lot of courage in standing up and saying, we will put that forward to voters who might not have all found it entirely popular. And I did that. I led on that with the strong public and private encouragement of the Premier of this province and other people. And then they pulled the rug out from underneath this city in terms of our own self-determination and to appease, frankly, the 905 and for political purposes. And we could have solved a lot of these problems if we'd had access to that money and, quite frankly, been accountable for it as a city council that was, for the first time in years, being prepared to stand up and be responsible for our actions, be accountable, and collect the money we need. And I'm now saying that a motion not moved by me, but by Councillor Mammoliti, that says we explore options for a campaign that can go forward and inform the public better about the fact that these tenants, after an investment of $1 billion of money derived by the City of Toronto and some money now to come from the federal government, needs the partnership of the province of Ontario to move forward and do what is right, and to do it the right way, which is not to do it through property taxation alone, because property taxes weren't meant for that. And if it means, quite frankly, that we need a new deal, then the campaign might say so. But the notion we should just go into a corner and kind of sit there and wait around timidly and sort of see if maybe they might decide to give us some money or maybe not is unacceptable to me. It doesn't involve standing up for Toronto and the most vulnerable people of this city, and those who advocate that should be ashamed of themselves. And I urge members to support this motion, Madam Speaker.
Now, we do have questions for you.
Any question you like?
Councillor Matlow.
Oh, this will be good.
Councillor Matlow, questions?
No, I realize it's not worth it.
No.
Councillor Mammoliti, questions?
Oh, sorry, are we doing chickens yet?
Councillor Mammoliti, questions?
I'm actually quite happy standing beside you and you supporting my motion, Mr. Mayor, because you actually, it may be one of the first times, yes, and you're the one, did you not, that asked me, maybe the last time we stood up and debated, I think it was on tolls or something, that someone come up with their own idea with respect to what it is we should do?
I may well have done. I probably did. And I think, again, I mean, this is not the only idea. This is not the only way to go about this, but I will continue to try on sitting at the tables privately and going to the meetings when they're held. We actually tried quite recently to send an emissary to talk about sitting at a table and trying to work something out, and we were met with kind of bafflement as if there was nothing to discuss. And so I just think this preparing of options here, as you've requested, I think quite reasonably by the city manager, who's a public servant, can look at how we might put our message across, is a reasonable request, and that's why I was happy to support it.
And it does help you, right? If the City of Toronto passes something in the way of an endorsement for you to be going out there and saying we need more money, it does help you, right? You're not alone out there in your shorts.
I have asked, I have asked in this chamber, I've asked more than once for help from you. And certainly on the day we decided together to move forward with the road tolls, there was lots of help in this room. There were a few people opposed, but by and large, we sent a very strong signal that we were prepared to stand up and say we were going to do something. And since that time, I've asked for your help, for the help of the council in trying to put our message forward. And there are some who've actually been of some help. And there are others who, I guess, advocate a completely different course of action, which involves us just going off into the corner and deciding we're going to throw in the towel. I'm not throwing in the towel for the people who live in Toronto community housing or for the City of Toronto, because I think that we are being shortchanged badly. And I think that we need to rectify that.
Okay.
So have you, I'm not suggesting at all that this is the reason why I've taken them down, but have you crossed my office lately? The cartoons are down.
What about the puppets?
No, I haven't been there recently, but I'll certainly make a trip by.
Please,
Thank you.
on topic, thank you.
What about the chickens?
Councillor Campbell.
So, question for Mr. Mayor. So, I'm looking at the political reality. The Conservatives, the Liberals have all but one seat in Toronto, correct? Where will the Liberals be focusing their attention in the next election? It is the issue, because this is a political matter. I guess I want to ask you, just from a political standpoint, what if you think that this will get traction given the political reality that the Conservatives have the Liberals have all but one seat in Toronto.
Well, I guess I'm unique in the position in this room of having been a provincial party leader, and I can assure you that one of the things you have to do is, yes, you have to focus on areas where you currently have strength, but you have to focus on that in the sense you need to preserve those seats to have a chance to stay in government or get to government. You also have to concentrate on all the other areas of the province, because whatever you do, you've got to end up with 55 or some odd seats. And so I'm very hopeful, but I'm very hopeful that we can put across the kind of options I'd be looking for from the city manager would be ones that didn't so much get into a political dogfight as put across the message of who it is we're standing up for here. We are standing up for people who can't speak up for themselves. We are standing up for people who don't have a voice or seem to have a voice in the system and are presently living in conditions they've lived in, quite frankly, for years. And it's because of the inadequate funding subsequent to the downloading, done, I will admit, by a progressive conservative government and years ago, and never fixed. And so I would say that all parties, and by the way, again, another piece of my advice would be that this campaign shouldn't be directed at any one party, but should be directed at all of the people who sit at Queen's Park as MPPs with the overall provincial responsibility for looking after people, and that we should be putting across a message that says, this is not right. We need your help to look after the most vulnerable people. Talk about a fairness agenda. A fairness agenda is covering minimum wage earners, it's covering childcare, I forget what other chapters have been announced. I think it's time to have one for people who live in Toronto community housing, and for that matter, I'd be happy if they did the same thing for other public housing residents who are living in substandard conditions across Ontario.
So I agree with your approach in the regard that there are people that can't speak for themselves. However, previous discussions with all three party leaders, have they led anywhere? I mean, have we received any sort of, yes, I agree with you, Mayor Tory, from either the Conservative leader or the NDP leader, and certainly we haven't from the leader of the Liberal Party.
Okay, I've had one round. I think it's very important I should answer that question honestly. As I try to answer all questions honestly, but with a very forthright answer. I have had one round with each of the, no, 2 rounds with the leader of the NDP, 1 round with the leader of the Conservatives, and 50 rounds with the leader of the Liberal Party, the Premier of Ontario. I will say from the Premier of Ontario, no, there haven't been any results. From the leader of the NDP, to be fair, she said she would cover their share of the repair bill for Toronto community housing, and I'm grateful for that. I think that's the right thing to do. I think that is recognizing their responsibility to help the most vulnerable people in this city and recognizing that the province has a role to play in funding housing. From the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, no results to date. That's the score as of this moment, and I'm saying we need to turn the pressure up, or at least examine options for turning the pressure up on all of them, so that we will have, on this moment in time, very similar to what we faced with the federal election as big city mayors, and I guarantee you, the fact we ran a sustained, organized, thoughtful, idea-based, policy-based campaign to the federal government, all the big city mayors did to all the parties, produced success where all 3 parties, the major parties, stood for funding of transit, for example, in the election campaign. I knew no matter who won the election, we were going to win out of that in terms of more funding for transit. I knew, and it was because we ran a campaign and we didn't back down.
I'm done now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shan?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to Mayor. Just a question around the direction of this campaign. You know, in the motion itself, it mentions Ontario government, but just there's some uneasiness about it being political. So I just wanted to kind of reconfirm if you see this campaign as being directed to all political parties, because they will be going into a campaign mode to have a city-specific strategy related to housing and transit when it comes to their platforms.
I see it as being directed to the issue or the issues, but in particular, I'd like to focus on the social housing issue. I think the transit issue is important as well, and I see it as being something that is directed at the Ontario legislature and all the members of the legislature and all parties really speaking up on behalf of Toronto and the people of Toronto, and in particular, the social housing residents of Toronto, to say that we need help. And you know, I think it's just fundamental, but no, I don't view it. And look, again, I say this in the context of what I said to Councillor Perks. You know, this is just asking for options for a campaign, and I can assure you I'll be less interested in one that comes back. I don't know how it could come back from our head public servant, for heaven's sake, and be partisan. But the very fact we're asking the city manager to explore options indicates to me that we're looking at a thoughtful, policy-based, ideas-based campaign that's about housing tenants and directed to the issue as opposed to a political or partisan thing, as opposed to anything else.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mihevik?
Yes, thank you very much. Let me just say first that I'll be supporting the motion. And I do think that as mayor, you have the intergov file, and we should frankly take under strong advisement. If the mayor feels at this point that a strategic campaign is of value, then I think that counts for a lot for me. But just to make sure that there's three little pieces that I think would be helpful to articulate. First is you're saying that this will be a political campaign, but not a partisan campaign. Is that a good way to typify it?
Everything we do, Councillor, is through you, Madam Speaker, is political. But yes, I have no intention. I even think, quite frankly, that in my words, and there'll be some who will take issue with this, maybe some who are big supporters of the government party that's up there, I think my comments to date on behalf of the City of Toronto and standing up for the City of Toronto have been non-partisan. I've just gone out of my way here today to commend the leader of the NDP for the fact that she came here and was prepared to say, yes, I'm committing our party to supporting the housing needs of this province.
Okay,
and everything I've said, if you look at it about Premier Wynne, in fact, I've gone out of my way with Premier Wynne because I believe it in my heart to say that I believe she genuinely cares about the issue that I'm fighting on here for Toronto and wants to help. So it will be a political campaign because everything we do is political, but issue-based, directed at trying to get action, not partisan.
Okay, that's a check for me. The second one is, I imagine that after this meeting, this file or this issue will go to your office, working with the city manager, and I think many of us on council would be interested in supporting idea tossing around, strategy tossing around. Could you assert that you will engage interested councillors in that conversation on how to do this?
I think those who are prepared to stand up for Toronto, I'd be most interested in hearing their thoughts as to how we could do that and working with the city manager, who I think, again, will be in charge of this file, not me. He has been asked through his office to prepare options on campaigns.
Great, thank you. And the third thing is the scope. We have really two levels of issues. One is we need cash and we need it yesterday. And the second one, and so, you know, it's not just, at one level I can see a campaign about the money. On another level, I can see a campaign that's rooted in, call it transformational change, that we actually redo perhaps the City of Toronto Act and say, you know what, we need some fundraising or financial capacity or new revenue tools, whatever word is appropriate, to actually change the nature of how we collect the income that we need to run the city. So we could go immediate cash or long-term transformational. And do you see this work as actually, it can go both ways and perhaps should go in both ways?
Yes, and I think the wording, while it's not perfect in that regard, I think certainly suggests that, talks about meeting the unaddressed needs, committing to increased long-term and predictable funding. And so I think it leaves the door open to our city manager coming back with options that could cover both of those and a variety of ways you could go about it and a variety of messages. So yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Karygiannis?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for not calling me a doctor. Some people might want me to be a doctor. Through you to the mayor. Mr. Mayor, you realize that the NDP coming forward and, to their credit, saying that we'll support this. Their opportunity to be in government is very slim. The other two parties that actually have a shot. You know, it's funny, Madam Speaker, that I got an echo behind me from the NDP individual, and from the other side, also NDP. It's not a prediction. That only happened once by mistake. But my question for you to the mayor is, we didn't get a commitment from either of the other two parties that has a shot either forming the government again, being returned to government, or forming the government again. Am I correct?
That is correct. But my objective, make no mistake through you, Madam Speaker, to the councillor, is to have, as we did federally, all parties agreeing to make the commitment, so that means that whatever the outcome of the election, all three parties have made a commitment on social housing and transit, and on potentially, as Councillor Mihevik was just referring, new ways that we could finance ourselves or have them help us finance ourselves. So that would be the objective, to have this campaign be part of getting all three of them to commit themselves.
And certainly you've launched campaigns before on your own. You've written letters to the province that you've asked us to tag on, even without the consultation of this council.
Well, I've tried my best to try to represent the council and the city and the people in the city and the tenants of Toronto Community Housing. And I think we've certainly made progress at putting the issue on the radar screen. I didn't need the authority of the council to do that. You're right. I think I had it because I think we did pass a couple of motions, in fact, supporting my efforts. So I would just say this is one more thing we could do to prepare. This is only preparing options so that we can come back in the fall and consider whether to use them or not.
But in this instance, through the chair to the mayor, in this instance, I think having the support of the council and as a body and the work that Mr. Wallace will do certainly will help as we move forward. And we will not be speaking as a political body. We will be speaking as a non-aligned political body as the city. And it's not the mayor that used to be the conservative leader of the Party of Ontario or myself that used to be a Liberal member of Parliament. We're speaking as non-political and non-politically aligned, saying we need your help. Would that be correct?
That is correct. I have been scrupulous since I've occupied this office not to associate myself in any way with any political party, go to any events. I get pictures taken with people of all parties because you can't avoid that. But at the end of the day, I've been scrupulous in not attending events or doing anything that would violate the nonpartisanship that I bring to this office.
But there were events that you held with the mayor of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, Patrick Brown, and that was, I believe, in Councillor Crawford's ward, and there was like about housing, and there was another one with the NDP leader, and of course theirs were non-political. I mean, it just happened that I was held that Councillor Crawford was just an incident.
I've been to events at which people of all parties have been, and I'm proud of the fact that I'm happy to be there and with them at things that support different parts of the community, but I have not been to a partisan political event to my recollection since I took this office, and I would continue to adopt that practice of not going to those events, although I come across those people and try to do business with them. Frankly, I try to work with them. I take every chance I get, frankly, to put across our case, including to the Premier just about every time I see her.
Councillor Davis?
Mr. Mayor, the actual motion before us does not talk about political parties. It just talks about the Ontario government. Would you be willing to either amend or allow me to speak and table the amendment to replace the Ontario government with all provincial political parties? That's my first question.
I would, but it's not my motion.
I think that you could agree.
No, well, Councillor Davis, the mayor was the last speaker, and I did say the mayor is the last speaker. You didn't put your name up, so no, you cannot speak. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Those are the rules.
Speaker.
Okay.
If it is the will of the House.
No, I made a ruling.
If it is the will of Council.
Unanimous consent.
To allow an additional speaker.
No.
To table a motion.
No, you'd have to challenge the chair. No, it's not even challenge. Councillor Davis, you just please ask your question to the mayor.
Well, I could support this if it was broader than what is before us.
I'm sorry, you should have put your name down before.
The difficulty with this is that it is not dedicated to look at all political parties and call on them to do that. So, I don't know what else to say, frankly. The other part I would have asked, there were many people who will say the best campaign for any politician is to point fingers at other levels of government. And through leading to your re-election campaign, this says that you would lead a task force and lead this campaign. And I guess there's some of us who think that that might be quite put you at a good advantage going into a next campaign. And I'm wondering whether or not you believe a task force is something that you would support. What is a task force that you would lead?
First of all, this is, of course, not my motion.
I understand
and
that.
Secondly, I would say if you look at the wording of it, it talks about the feasibility of striking a mayor's task force. If you said to me, if it was of concern to people that I might lead this campaign and lead this task force and use it for somehow to facilitate my own interests, I'm happy to see it not happen. and it'll come back here in any event. It just says, would they please examine the feasibility of this and come back and report on it? To be quite frank, I'm not overconfident, but I don't think a task force on this is really going to make much of a difference in whether I get reelected or not. I'm prepared to roll the dice and do without a task force if that's going to make people feel better. But I don't even know that they'd come back and recommend one. We're asking the manager, the city manager, a public servant, to look at whether a mayor's task force led by the mayor, who happens to be me at the moment, would be helpful in advancing our cause. That's the way I look at it. But if they say no, or you say no, fine by me.
Okay.
So, Speaker, I guess there is no way at this point to amend this unless the mover of the motion were willing to amend it. I don't know if that's possible. But I think that what the mayor's answers are not reflected in what is before us. So I just wonder, there's got to be some way that this chamber, this body, could consider some kind of an amendment at this point.
I would say, by the way, Madam Speaker, one more thing I forgot, just I'm not that sure there's a question. I'm sure there was a question mark at the end of that sentence. That a task force implies, by the way, more than one person. So it could be there'd be 3 members of this council, representative of whatever, that would do this together as opposed to the mayor doing it alone. But as I say, I don't really care. The task force, if it was deemed to be helpful to the city and to the tenants of TCHC, terrific. And if not, terrific.
I'm not talking about the task force. I'm talking about an amendment to recommendation 1 that would call on all political parties instead of the Government of Ontario. And Mr. Mayor, maybe finally, there will be people who will say the city has not done everything it can do. And the provincial government has said as well that we have not exercised and used our taxation to the fullest. And I guess I'm wondering, and I've asked you this before, are you prepared to increase property taxes higher than the rate of inflation and the 2% that you've stuck to in order that we can stand up and say we've done our
Davis,
share?
that's not even on the topic. I'm sorry.
Madam Speaker, no, I'm delighted to answer that question. Because with keeping property taxes at the rate of inflation, we have nonetheless found ways, not all through property tax revenues, in which we, the City of Toronto, and you as a member of this council, have proudly and properly put up $1 billion towards these repairs so far. And that has been done without an 18% increase this year to the Toronto Community Housing and a capital budget, as you know, that they're not even able to spend all of it this year. It's $250 million plus, all from city-derived funds. We're responsible for it all, however it got derived. And so I'm proud to say, actually, that we've been able to do both. And I know that you think it's impossible to actually put money where your priorities are, including in Toronto Community Housing repair, without massive increase in property taxes. You and I just respectfully disagree on that. And we've actually put up $250 million of city-derived money and brought about an 18% increase in the operating funding of TCHC this year.
No.
Oh, no, and there's probably one from your neighbor. I can't wait to hear that one.
Thank you. Your time's up, Councillor Davis. Your time was up. And what is your point of privilege? What is your point of privilege?
That the mayor once again made some remarks and characterized my participation here in a way that was not accurate.
Councillor Davis, please. I'm sorry. Councillor Perruzza, questions. You know, we do want to finish this council agenda, Councillor Davis. Councillor Perruzza.
Thank you, Speaker. I would much have preferred to speak on this rather than ask questions, but let me ask a couple of questions related to this, to the mayor. I mean, you've played nice with the current Liberal government.
Okay,
You've played rough with the current Liberal government. Why do you?
Hold on, Councillor Davis.
Can I have my 20 seconds back?
On the floor.
Can I have my 20 seconds back?
Yes.
Oh,
Councillor.
Can I get my 20 seconds back, Speaker?
My God, Councillor Davis, please. Show some respect.
Absolutely.
That's bullying.
Okay, Councillor Perruzza.
To the mayor, Speaker. Mr. Mayor, you've played nice with the current Liberal provincial government. You've played rough with the current provincial government. Why do you think you have been unsuccessful in bringing into the table and providing funding for housing, for transit, and other city priorities?
I think because there's a fundamental conflict inside the government between people like the Premier, who I think recognize the moral and other kinds of responsibility to address this issue, and those who are either on a different political wavelength, who come from other parts of the province, or who are saying that they have committed their money elsewhere and can't afford to do things for us. And I think they're caught in a circumstance where this is a historic problem that they inherited, quite frankly, and they inherited going all the way back to the downloading without any money for repairs. And now you have 2 of 3 governments that have stepped up. The federal government has stepped up, not as much as might be the case to provide for a full third. We have stepped up big time and put up the third and actually invested it, or are in the process of doing so. But I think it's as simple as that. And I think in the end, we need to keep the pressure on, because I believe that with the leadership of the Premier and where her heart is and her mind on this, they will come to the correct conclusion. But I think they will not do it if we sit back as advocated in the corner and just kind of wait for some mythical table to emerge that we go to. We've been to the table many, many times, many times. And if, by the way, you think sending somebody else up to the table, we tried that too quite recently, and that didn't work either.
But you would think that a provincial party that is going to be going to election some 10, 11, 12 months down the road, that they would be looking for popular political initiatives for them to be able to do that would improve their re-election standing. So for example, if they thought for 1 minute, wouldn't you agree that if they thought for 1 minute that building a one-stop Scarborough subway stop at a cost of $5 or $6 billion was a popular initiative, don't you think they'd be out there in the photo op, taking the photo op with you, providing money to get that done?
I would actually remind you, through you, Madam Speaker, that they already are. All 3 governments are committed to building the extension.
No, I understand that. I understand that, but they've given you no money for it.
So you know what I think it is, to be honest again? I think it is that housing, especially housing that is of social housing, does not actually rank very high when it comes to people's considerations about casting their vote. And that's a real shame when we have tens of thousands of people living in this city in the conditions that they're living in, and we're unable to find all the money through property taxation, nor should we, to fix that. And so I think that's what it is. I'm actually trying through this campaign.
Councillor Perruzza, stop interrupting.
I'm actually trying through my efforts, Madam Speaker, and through examining options for a campaign, which is all this asks to do, to see if we can make it more of an issue, so that maybe all of those provincial political parties will feel that this should be near the top of the list, in addition to other commitments they've already made on the subway extension and other things, to say, you know what, it actually is, when you want to talk about fairness, the right thing to do, to have the province and the federal government and the city all together saying, we together are going to do something that hasn't been done for decades, invest in that housing, bring it up to a proper standard, and then maintain it at a proper standard going forward. And so that's what this is all about.
For example, if they thought for 1 minute that your smart track plan, the 5 or 6 stops you want to build on a goal line at a cost of 2 or 3 billion city share, and I don't know how many other billions from other levels of government. If they thought that that was a popular get vote kind of plan, don't you think they'd be there at the photo op with you and giving you money to get that done?
But Madam Speaker, they have been at the photo ops with me on Smart Track, and they are helping to get it done, and we're partnering with them, and we're putting up money for it as well. But they're putting up money, as is the federal government. That's the whole point. There are projects, and by the way, Councillor Matlow earlier on referred to the fact that they'd put billions into Toronto. Every speech I have made without exception, and I'm now going to fulfill it for today, I have acknowledged the billions they put in the past, or for projects that are presently under construction. This is about the future. This is about the future of TCHC residents who are living in substandard accommodation, and this is about the future transit projects we have to continue to build in this city, because we've stopped too many times before as the city has continued to grow. So they have actually partnered with us, they continue to partner with us, and they do show up. In fact, half the photo ops are their photo ops that I go to. And we go there together to say we're working together, as we did in the Portlands last week. That's a good example of where governments can work together to move things forward. I'm just saying, let's apply the same thing to Toronto community housing.
That was your last...
There are people who really deserve our collective support as government.
That was your last question.
To help them get out of the situation they're in.
Okay, on the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Longtime, when you're seated there, please. Thank you. Councillor McMahon, your vote, please. Councillor Davis, please.
The motion carries 30-9.
Okay. All right, so members of council, we were debating the confidential report that was requested for the audit committee has been circulated, so please read it. It's there, but it's just I want to make sure that people read it, because I don't want to go on camera and members of council say I haven't had a chance to read it. Yes, Councillor Fragadakis.
Sorry, just a point of order. At what time are we expected to go into camera on this item of the Auditor General?
Well, has everybody read it?
I wasn't asking about now, I'm asking about at what time.
Well, I was going to go back now.
Oh, okay.
If everyone, that's why I mentioned the report is on your desk. But what I would like to ask members of council, rather than us go back and forth in camera and out, because it takes us at least 20 minutes to go in and out of camera. So there are a number. Want to do it at 6:30? We'll go in, no, we'll go in camera at 6:30? Okay, but what I need to know from members of council, though, there are a number of items that were held down. There were confidential items. If we're going to go on camera on the audit committee, we should go with all the items. So I'm not sure if members of council that have held the items down need to go on camera on these items. So we'll get, yeah. So if you want to go in camera on any of the items that you've held down, please let the clerk know so we can deal with all the items at the same time. Okay, Councillor Ojamari?
On page 10, CC 31.12, I have 3 questions and I need to meet with the appropriate staff to get the questions answered before we go in camera if possible, so that I can take it off our agenda.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So we'll have to arrange for someone to come down here and answer those questions for you then. Okay, so any other members of council that have held items down that are confidential attachments, if you can let the clerk know before we recess at 6:30 so we can deal with all of them at the same time. So we'll go to the top of the, we'll just go to the top of the agenda? Right, okay. Page 3, EX 26.1, Councillor Cressy. Oh, that's time for tomorrow? Oh, okay, sorry. We're going, that's time for tomorrow. EX 26.10, which is a Lakeshore Arena, the AGM. Councillor Perks, you held the item down. Do you have questions to staff?
Yes, I do.
Okay, questions?
So,
hold on, let me just see who's here to answer your questions.
I don't know who, city manager's
Who's here
office
to answer
or...
the questions for the Lakeshore Arena? Okay, yes, okay, go ahead. Okay.
So I'm just trying to refresh my memory on some of the details here. There are a couple of pieces of debt that are out there, some with the city, some with Infrastructure Ontario. Could you just run down what those are for me, please?
On page...
If you could stand so I can see.
Yes,
yeah.
sorry. Through the chair, on page 8 of 10 of 26.10, it lays out the loans payable. There is a fixed amount to VersaBank for $19.2 million at 5.23%, maturing October 31st of this year. There is a general loan to the city, which is interest only at a variable rate of 3%. That is being refinanced with Infrastructure Ontario currently. There is a sustainable energy plan financing loan of $207,000, and there's a City of Toronto energy retrofit loan of $500,000 that is paid off at $100,000 a year.
So with the refinancing to Infrastructure Ontario, does the city still ultimately, you know, wind up backstopping that? It becomes our responsibility in the event of everyone else failing.
Yes, through the chair, the city has guaranteed that loan, and part of that loan was also that they would refinance the loan that's coming due October 31st.
And we will be on the hook for that, ultimately on the hook for that as well.
The city is on the hook. The city is also the sole shareholder of Lakeshore Arena Corporation.
Okay, thank you. Now, in terms of Lakeshore Arena, my understanding is you sit on their board and monitor their finances. Is the Lakeshore Arena, last year, did it break even?
On a cash flow basis, similar to how the city budgets on a cash requirements basis, after debt service costs, it broke even last year, even though a couple of the rinks were closed partly during the summer for a roof repair.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood. Did it, not on a cash basis, but on a full accrual accounting basis, did it or did it not break even?
On a full accrual accounting basis, it is not breaking even in that it's not covering its amortization costs.
It's not covering its amortization
which
costs.
are non-cash costs.
Yes, I understand that. Thank you. Did it break even the year before?
Yes, it has since the city has taken over. It is more or less broken even. It has turned a small surplus on a cash requirements basis, not on a full accrual basis.
So it's on day-to-day operating, it's breaking even, but it's not covering the cost of the financing.
It's covering the cost of financing. It's not covering the costs of renovations and state of good repair that will be required in the future.
Right, so they're not building up a cash reserve for repairs and so on.
Correct.
Okay. Those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grimes, you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is there somebody from Parks and Recreation that can answer my questions? Maybe Robert, maybe...
I don't think there's anybody from Parks here. Is there anybody from Parks?
CFO can answer it. I just want to know, how much do we make on our arenas a year? Let's say Centennial Park or Moss Park. How much do we make a year on those arenas? Can you answer that question? Our CFO?
Okay, who's here to answer that question?
Maybe Jim Hart can answer that question.
Hello, is there anybody here to answer that question?
How about Jim Hart? Can you answer that question? Councillor Hart, sorry. No?
I don't think there's anybody from Parks here.
Can the CFO answer the question?
Councillor Grimes, nobody can answer your question.
Can the CFO answer the question?
I know. Can the CFO answer the question? Juliana, Juliana.
Yeah, we do.
No, we don't. We lose on every asset we have.
So through you, Madam Speaker, the question, if I understand it correctly, is you want to know on just the arena boards or all arenas?
Let's take Mimico Arena, Moss Park Arena.
I don't have information for the individual arenas.
How much money do we make on the arenas a year?
Okay, hold on. Councillor Grimes, we have Parks here.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Ask the question to Parks.
It's basically break
Okay, through the speaker, sorry, can you repeat the question?
I just want to know, there was a question on the MasterCard Center, Lakeshore Lions Arena, it's called the MasterCard Center now. it's breaking even. How much do we make on Memco Arena a year, Moss Park? How much do we make on our parks, on our arenas a year?
Well, Moss Park, separate from the arena boards, which are a separate budget item, each arena is different, but we roughly break even on the direct operating costs.
So on an average, all the arenas the city owns, we break even. That's what they're
Roughly.
there for, right?
I would agree with that, yes.
Great, so we're not making money on arenas.
Certainly not making
Right.
money, no.
And I guess, Dan, is there, I got to ask a question. So the Lakeshore Lions Arena, now the MasterCard Center, I know you're very involved in the board. How do you see things heading now? The city's taking it over. It's taken a couple of years to get the new board in place. How do you see us moving forward from here?
Through the speaker, I'm actually going to ask Anna Ulsoy to answer the question. She's currently sitting on the board.
Oh, wait a second. Maybe Councillor Perks may come back in here. Is he around? Oh, I guess he doesn't care. Oh, go ahead.
The board was able to stabilize the operations. The city contributed a share capital infusion of $8.1 million last year, which turned the deficit into the surplus. The arena makes a lot of money. However, it has a large debt load, $31 million as it stands right now, and because of the debt service amounts, it's losing money on paper.
So this arena makes a lot of money. It's just because the debt.
Yes, if it was debt-free, it would have contributed over $5 million to the city since city took it over.
Oh, that's great. Where's Councillor Perks? Is he around? No, maybe not. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Councillor DiCiano.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. If I ever saw an example of someone speaking out of both sides of their mouth, can anyone answer, is a community asset, when we bring it to when we bring something forward to a community, is it supposed to break even? Because I know that as a budget
Hold
member.
on, Councillor Carroll, what is your point of
Madam
personal
Speaker,
privilege?
on a point of privilege, it is my understanding that councillors may, if they wish to, rise on a point of privilege on behalf of staff. I'm wondering if you could instruct the councillor that when a remark is made, such as talking out of both sides of their mouth, it might be a viewer on television might think that you're talking about staff and accusing them of talking out of both sides of their mouth. So parliamentary language would be appreciated, lest there be a misinterpretation of your slant.
Councillor Carroll, Councillor DiCiano
Yes, Madam Speaker?
was not referring to staff.
That's my point, Madam Speaker.
Yeah.
My point of personal
He was talking about me.
If I may have the microphone. That is my point of personal privilege, Madam Speaker. I think it is important. I wish that you would instruct councillors that when a remark like that is made in questions to staff, a viewer at home might actually misinterpret that as an attack on staff. That is my point of privilege.
I'll clarify. I apologize to anyone at home. There was no intention whatsoever to say that staff were doing anything but answering questions diligently with respect to this matter. My comments were in respect to comments that came from this council floor with respect to other councillors. As a member of the Budget Committee, I have undertaken hundreds of hours in a committee room where I've listened to certain councillors here tell us that when we spend money, there shouldn't be an economic analysis done, that it's done because of community services that we provide people. That was the point of speaking out of both sides of your mouth.
Okay,
so the comments now, I'm asking staff if I can clarify my comment.
Carroll, please
do
keep
we
it down.
build arenas?
Councillor DiCiano, you're on the floor to ask staff questions, please.
And I was just asking staff.
Okay.
Do we build arenas? Do we build pools? Do we build parks so that we can break even?
Through the speaker, the use of the parks is for community use as a community asset.
That's my question. Thank you very much for your wonderful response. Appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. So my understanding, maybe staff could clarify for me. So this is not exactly a city asset so much as a partnership project. Am I right? We have some community use of it, but it in fact is not deemed an arena of the city. It's different than the board arenas that we otherwise manage.
So through you, Madam Speaker. So the arena boards are separately managed, as is this one, but they are city assets, city-owned assets.
For instance, if the loan were to default, then the asset comes back to us along with the loan.
The asset is ours already. If the loan defaults, we have to step in its place and repay.
So is it fair to say we understand the deficit grew this year due to good reason? There was a roofing issue and some improvements done. That's all well and truly outlined in the audited financial statements. So the question is this. We do see a sort of a trend there, and even if we subtract the roof report, we see a bit of a trend. We're still booking deficits owing to the loan repayment. Is it city's understanding that the board has a goal and a timeline by which they expect to get to zero and not be in an operating deficit as a result of making their payments?
You answer.
Do they have a policy goal to get there by a time?
Through the chair, we do not have that, although when we refinance the fixed rate debt that was that we inherited at 5.23%. When we refinance that at the end of October, we will then have more certainty and can certainly plan for that.
And would the city have, I need my memory refreshed on the arrangement, would the city at that time have the ability to move a direction through budget or whatever, similar to what we did with the ownership of the theaters, where we said, okay, you're not operating at a zero balance, have a goal, get to zero by a certain point in time? Do we have the right to establish that with an entity like Lakeshore Arena?
It's a city services corporation. Certainly the city can make any direction they wish.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very much.
Wow. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Speaker. One of the original proposals for this arena was that it was going to have revenue generating, I think food services and other functions in the building. And did that ever happen?
There was vacant second floor space that was originally scheduled for a restaurant. We were not able to secure tenants for a restaurant operation, so part of the floor was used for other tenancies. The remaining is being considered for different uses.
And those tenancies are paying rent?
Yes.
So part of the reason that there was a loss was the financing model for the debt repayment schedule included that revenue. Is that not correct?
That was the original calculation prepared by Lakeshore Lions Club, who was the original builders of the arena.
So the original debt was how much?
It was originally 44 million. It's now down to 31 million. Okay. Including a share capital contribution from the city.
Okay. And one of the issues at the time as well that was affecting the ability of this arena to meet its obligations to pay back the capital costs was how expensive the ice time was, and it was difficult to attract users. Is the arena at full capacity now in terms of
the arena
uses?
is a prime location and has always been at full capacity since inception.
Okay, and its rate is very high.
Its rate is about a little over than $400 per hour. It's certainly the most expensive arena within the city of Toronto, but it's full.
So we have the most expensive arena in the city of Toronto at $400 an hour, and it is still not able to pay back the full debt recovery, cost recovery model or repayments that was originally envisioned by this deal.
Right. That's correct, but I'd like to remind that in the city of Toronto, we never build arenas with 100% financing. This was a deal that was 100% debt financed.
So,
and is this?
if I may, I think that's the key point here.
No, and I'm getting to my point, which was.
$43.4 million it started with outstanding debt.
Right.
In our city-run arenas, we do not require our arenas to repay our debt.
I
And this
understand
one
that.
does.
But this is a model that we have promoted for the last 2 new arenas that we have built. And it was a debt-financed, cost recovery model that we were promoting. So I know that even Leaside has struggled and to pay back their debt. This arena has struggled to pay back debt financed. And so, Speaker, my question is this a model that we should be replicating in the future? It seems to me we get stuck carrying the debt anyway.
Through you, Madam Speaker. So there are operational models and then there are cost recovery models. For an arena of this size, and we've seen it even in some other arenas, to expect it to be 100% debt financed and recover all that debt, it's not going to happen right now.
Exactly.
So there needs to be a mixture of funding for capital that is recognizes, like we do in our regular capital budget, a mixture of property taxes, reserves, and debt funding. I think to have an arena 100% debt funded and to think it will recover all that is difficult.
Is not a model that works. And so I'm wondering, I hope, and maybe I can ask the general manager of PFNR, when our capital facilities, our facilities master plan comes back, are we looking at this kind of model of self-financed capital, or are we going to come back with publicly financed capital, debt-financed facilities that will allow us to actually only be concerned about the operating costs as opposed to recovering the capital costs for the users?
That was your last question.
So through the Speaker, the master plan, which has not yet been before Council, will speak more to a priority of what we need rather than to the actual operational structure of what you're speaking to. It will speak to the need for partnerships of all sorts to move forward as we do now with various public sector and private sector organizations. But the model that you're referring to as 100% debt financed is not something that we look to, as the Chief Financial Officer has said, as a model for the future.
Thank you. Councillor Burnside.
Yeah, thank you. Through you to staff. So if I understand correctly, the cost to build this facility was $44 million?
43.4 million.
Close enough, yeah, thanks. The average arena, this is a twin pad or is it three pads? 4? The average facility is what, about 15 million a pad, so this is not a bad deal? 12 million, 15? Okay. What do we think the length of, what have we got the length of time to pay off this debt as? Is it a 30-year, 20-year?
We're refinancing it 25 years, so 25 years from today.
Okay. And a comment was made that the reason we're running a deficit is because we're paying off the debt. And I think that comment was made. Did you hear the same comment?
Yes, on a full accrual basis, it does not break even because of the debt load.
Right. So there's...
On a cash basis, without the amortization, it is breaking even.
Of course.
Like our other arenas, which we do not charge the debt to.
So there's a reasonable expectation for the next 25 years, we'll be running a deficit.
That's possible. That's surely possible, yes.
Wow, okay. So in this case, as with most arena boards, the city covers any deficit, correct? Right. We said the rental fee is $400, correct? Are you aware of what a comparable facility, private facility is in the city?
It's in the 300s for private facilities, depending on the
If I said to you Upper Canada was about 375, would that surprise you?
No.
Right. Okay, thanks. So are you aware of it? Are there any other arrangements we have with the city where ice pads have actually been built and any deficits are not covered by the city?
Councillor, this wasn't built as a city facility. It was built by Lakeshore Lions Club, and city provided a loan guarantee to the club. After they operated the arena for 2 years, it was clear that they were not going to meet their obligations for debt service. So they have approached the city, and council decided that it would be we would be taking over the assets and liabilities in a new city service corporation.
Okay, fair. Sorry, I understand that. But are there any situations in the city where we have arena boards where a deficit is run and it actually gets added to, actually the rental fee of the facility?
Through the speaker, I'd ask the city manager's office to reply. The relationship framework with the arena boards is specifically through that.
So through you, Madam Chair, I believe you're probably referring to the lease. I believe is the Leaside Arena.
Correct.
That we have a loan. And under the arrangements with those arena boards and that particular loan, Adir can correct me, they are to recover the costs of their loan. Any deficits get carried over to the following year. And we did make some recent changes to those arrangements. And for the life of me, I can't remember what they are.
Yeah,
did that last year.
That was just if they had a surplus that got.
Yes, that's
they could put that towards.
We allowed them to carry over the surplus to cover any past.
But I guess my concern, and my question will lead to this, is they're talking about there's been discussion about a roof issue being sort of out of the blue, and that now gets covered by the city of these repairs that may or may not be. Like everything gets piled on to the city in this case of the MasterCard Center, no?
So my understanding is on the MasterCard Center, there was an issue with the roof, and I'll need help on answering how did we cover that?
The capital expenditures for MasterCard Center is at city's capital budget. However, PFNR's capital budget. However, any surplus goes towards a reserve fund to build a capital reserve for the MasterCard Arena.
Okay, thank you. And I have one last question. If the rates were raised by $20 per hour, what would that mean in terms of revenue? And would that address the deficit situation in this situation?
That was your last question?
Very roughly, it would address some of the deficit, yes. I can't provide an exact number.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Perks to speak? You don't want to speak? Okay. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll get up. This history of this arena has come through this council many, many times. This went under when David Miller was here. Certain members of the council like to skate out of here, and Gord Perks skates out of here, doesn't want to hear the information, just likes to drag this through the mud every time it goes through. We do not make money on arenas. If this debt was not there, we'd be making $5 million on this arena. This was an arena that was brought forward by the Lions Club, a service club in South Etobicoke who sold the original arena. They sold brick by brick in the 50s to build the arena for the city. It turned over to the city. They ran it on our behalf for years. It was at the end of its life. I think Councillor Campbell was on the school board at that time with Trustee Davis. And we worked with the Lions Club in a partnership with the city to bring this forward. If we had to bring a 4-pad arena in the cookie cutter approach we used to build arenas, we'd all be dead before we ever built this arena. It was an approach that we thought would be a good model to come forward. Unfortunately, the original cost was $34 million, and it went over budget. It went to 44, which made it a very far stretch for the Lions Club. But I'm not here to kick the Lions Club when they were down. We took it back off the Lions Club. We put a board together. It's an awesome board. It's taken a couple of years to go back. We had some problems with the roof, but this is a premier facility in this city. You've got tenants like Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, Hockey Canada, the Hockey Hall of Fame Archives, Etobicoke Sports Hall of Fame, and I can tell you, without those A-class tenants, this never would have came through council. But those tenants stepped up and allowed this thing to come forward. Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment prepaid the rent. Faustina Hockey Club, which is the oldest hockey club in the city, they were protected, their rates were protected. The Etobicoke Dolphins, girls hockey, never had a home until this arena was built. What's that worth? The girls did not have a rink, they had to play behind the boys all over the city. Now they have a home. You go in there on any weekend, Pink the Rink event the Dolphins have, it's absolutely ram-packed full of program. I had the opportunity to take Lanny McDonald through there last week, and he was blown away by that arena. His board has got things under control. We're going to move things forward. There's still some room open there that we're trying to get built out to get more revenue to come in, but this is a premier. It's called the MasterCard Hockey Excellence for a reason. The other thing that's happening there, it's there's speed skating in there. World-class speed skating champions now. Where can you speed skate in Toronto? This is the second Olympic-sized piece of ice in the city. The other one's at York. We only had one in this city, which is a shame. So this is a premier facility. Anyone like to come and tour it, I'd love to bring you out there and show it to you. But every time this comes through council, certain members of this council want to drag it through the mud. But this is a fantastic facility for our boys and girls and for the city.
You're here.
Councillor Burnside.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sure.
Very nice, thank you.
Remember, I supported your sign.
We love the penny pinchers in Etobicoke. Apart from that, I think that the some of the arrows that are being pointed in the way of my friends from Etobicoke are ill-placed or ill-aimed, in that, to Councillor Grimes' point, it is a premier facility. The reason I'm rising is that I believe now it's costing about $750 million a year for this facility. For 4 pads, that's actually a good deal. But more importantly is we do have a real problem in this city, and it's the state of our facilities. In Don Mills, we're basically holding it together with duct tape. And we don't have a proper, and glue, thank you. We don't have a proper model. Hockey tape, no hockey tape doesn't work. We don't have a proper model. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that we have all these facilities that are long past their useful life, and we really need a strategy. I know the question was asked to the Parks Department what that strategy will be, but we really need a strategy where we can start building proper facilities. Many of the ones in Toronto, in my opinion, are quite embarrassing. I'm proud we have the MasterCard Centre. I wish the Leaside Arena had the same deal, but that's for another day.
Thank you. Councillor Davis to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I don't know what slinging mud is supposed to mean around here, but I gather anytime anyone asks questions, it's interpreted in a negative light. I am happy that there's a new arena in Leaside, and I am happy that there is a premier facility in Etobicoke. But what's happened is that the model that we were sold on at the time both of them were built has not delivered. So this is not a model that will work in every neighborhood either. These are neighborhoods that have been able to afford to pay them. This arena got naming fees from MasterCard for some period of time, but I think that naming right has expired, and there are no more revenues from that source. And I absolutely agree with Councillor DiCiano that we need a plan. Our facilities plan was supposed to have come to us in 2007. 2007, the Auditor General wrote and asked for a facility and recreation service plan. And here we are a decade later, and no capital money in any reserves to try and meet the unmet needs across this city. We have not responded to growth. We have not responded to demand. And I'm afraid that when that master plan comes forward, we're going to shrug our shoulders and say, once again, how are we going to pay for it? We have built one facility in the last, I don't know how many years. There was one community center that was built, and there's one more coming. Then there was an additional one that was built through Section 37 funds. But in terms of the actual capital budget, in areas that didn't have Section 37 funding, we have not been able to invest in our recreation facilities. I'm not saying that there hasn't been an interest or desire to do that, but most of our capital money has been devoted to transportation, transit, housing, and recreation facilities have fallen off the edge of our capital planning. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to finance the kind of facilities that we need to meet the demands of our communities right across the city in a model that works, which is a publicly funded model. And because these ones have proven not to be self-financing, and it's not a model that will work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I only wish to make clear why I was asking questions on this item. It's a shame that Councillor Burnside isn't here. I guess he doesn't care. I guess he doesn't care.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
I simply wanted to demonstrate what unparliamentary language does, which was used
point of order.
Ago.
Councillor Karygiannis.
Madam Chair, I think that if you ask staff, they will clarify to you that it's not appropriate for one of us to name if somebody else is in the chamber. Unless the practice is different from parliamentary procedure in the other places, then this should also hold. It's unfair for a member to mention if another member is present, yes or no. That has been done a number of times this afternoon. Am I correct, Madam Chair?
Yes, you are correct, but
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank you for that ruling because I only mentioned a member to demonstrate that the language earlier was that unparliamentary. So I want to thank Councillor Karygiannis and yourself for agreeing. Thank you.
Councillor Carroll, I haven't even spoken, so stop interrupting.
I heard you just
I did
say,
not
yes,
make
that's
a ruling.
correct.
All I said is thank you, Councillor. That's all I said. Please stop interrupting.
Correct, Madam Speaker.
You're being very rude, Councillor Carroll. To Councillor Karygiannis, Councillor, to your point of order, I just want to respond to you, not to Councillor Carroll, to Councillor Karygiannis, is that comment was made, but in fact, Councillor DiCiano made the same comment on another councillor, so I'm going to ignore that.
But was I correct, Madam
Yes, you
Chair?
are correct.
Thank you, Madam
But
Chair.
it's been said twice.
That's all. Thank you, Madam.
Okay, and that's my ruling, Councillor Carroll.
So I want to thank you again for your ruling, Madam Speaker, because it isn't really the point here. But I will rise to make this point. This is an audited financial statement, and the meeting that was held at Executive Committee was, in fact, the annual general meeting of the Lakeshore Arena. And so that is an item that we should read with great care. And Ms. Ulasoy very well outlined the financial situation of this arena, as she is wont to do. That is her job, after all. And it is my right as a councillor, when I see something that, while it brings in $5 million of revenue a year, it is carrying a debt burden. Well, it's called the MasterCard Center, and so it probably doesn't feel like a... Sorry, gentlemen, I think I'm having trouble. Thanks. While it's carrying the name the MasterCard Center, folks may not realize that the net debt of $40 million will be ours if it doesn't work. So, when I read the financial statements, if I find upon reading the financial statements that in fact the operating deficit meant to be shrinking a little each year actually doubled, I'm going to read the report. And if I don't get all the answers in that report, I'm going to ask questions. Some I may be able to ask offline, which in this case I was able to get some of my information offline. As a result of hearing other councillors' questions, I may have one or two more. And in that case, I'll rise and ask them. The question I asked on this item was of staff, just to be sure, should I be even more concerned next year, what will be my ramifications? What kind of a facility is this? Am I allowed to say this year at budget time, you guys need to set a target. You guys need to get to zero balance annually. That's a better way. I'd like you to set a program of getting there by a certain year. That's what budget committee members do. I dare say the budget chief may have already done it, but I don't know that. And so I will use this chamber to ask those questions and make sure that the city's liability, the city's debt load, is not at risk. That's what councillors do, and that's all that was being done here. I don't call that arrows, I call it my mandate. I fulfilled my mandate now, and so I'm comfortable doing exactly, Madam Speaker, what the recommendations of this report say. But at Budget Committee, I may be asking how it affects our debt should we have to take it on, so that the ultimate ceiling on our budget is able to take this on should it one day have to do so. That's my mandate. That's what I'm here for. And I don't call that arrows or slings or whatever. That's our job. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor DiCiano.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, thank you. Through you, I'm also glad that this item was brought to the council floor, although I'm sure most people would have preferred that we handled these questions offline, which would have been just as good. But what came out of this discussion was pretty clear, that the MasterCard Center has been full from the day it got built, that it's been extremely successful, and that it's making a pile of money, irrespective of how it was financed, when it was financed. I wasn't here, but I doubt that there's any member of the community, whether it's Faustina Hockey, whether it's the Dolphins Girls Hockey Association, whether it's the Humber Valley, any of these organizations, the thousands of kids that come there for all these tournaments from across North America, whether they care how this thing got built, or whether they just appreciate the fact that they got ice hockey in Etobicoke to skate on. So I'm glad that it came to show the success that the MasterCard Center has brought not only to Etobicoke Lakeshore, but for the people, the residents to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DiCiano.
You're welcome.
Okay, on the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
The item carries unanimously, 37 in favor.
On page 3, EX 26.20, Councillor Ainsley, you held the item down. Do you have questions to staff?
Madam Speaker, I don't know who I'm directing them to. I know that Mr. Brendan wrote the report. Mr. Rossini? Okay. So, Mr. Rossini, one of the things I learned last week, and I was appointed by City Council, I'm on the Ontario Good Roads Association. One of the things that we reviewed at our policy committee was this item on railway levy. And it's my understanding from that organization that Ontario is one of the last provincial jurisdictions that does this levy based on acreage and not on assessed land value and track.
So through you, Madam Speaker, so the railway and rights-of-way taxation is something that's been understudied since I got into municipal finance in the late 80s. In 1998, the system was reformed to try to standardize, to go to the acreage-based system, and there was a commitment to go to some type of uniform or average acreage rate. There wasn't any inflation indexing applied to it. The province has now indicated they're going to start that. So it is an issue, and there's warts and problems with any kind of taxation, whether you go with a market-based assessment on these rights-of-ways or the acreage. The acreage was back in '98 deemed to be the fairest way to move forward with this in Ontario.
Okay, and so my understanding in Ontario, for example, aside from the Ontario Good Roads Association, the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities has a similar issue we just discussed earlier about our inability to pay for our infrastructure, and they're looking at other provinces and why they've begun advocating with the province for per tonnage-based assessment, and I don't see any reference to that in the report. What I saw at Ontario Good Roads was the province was looking at 3 different options: an indexed rate, there's a minimum rate based on tonnage, and then there's a straight up tonnage. But the letter that we got from the province said that they were only looking at an indexed rate of increasing ours by $6 a year.
Through the chair, we are on a committee with AMO and the province looking at this matter, and the rate that they have given is the rate that they're proposing for 2018 or 2017. The other alternatives are being looked at as part of the future. There is no decision yet as to how they're going to change the taxation of rail lines.
Right, and are there going to be any public hearings on this at all that the city can participate in or that we should be advocating for? Or?
I don't know about public hearings. I do know at the staff level there is a lot of investigation being done now. I expect that they would hold something, but it is a provincial matter that will follow their process.
Because one of the things that stood out for me, and I think this is really important for the city, so currently we're being assessed at $611 an acre. The province of Alberta, I'll use it as an example. So they use a formula that looks at land value, which is the assessed value by municipality, which Ontario doesn't allow us to use. And then they look at the gross tonnage of a freight train, for example, and the rate per mile of track. And so where we get an assessed value in Ontario of $611 an acre, in Alberta, for example, that same equation, when you use their formula, we get $611. In Alberta, they get $50,800 for that same kilometer of track on an annual basis. And that's only if you run 5 million tons over that track. Would that be surprising to you?
Through the chair, that is not surprising. We are looking at this. We are advocating for something more. Actually, the GTA has the highest rates at $611. The North are, I believe, $35 an acre. And they would like our rate. We would like a rate substantially higher.
Yep, so the example I'll use as the province is continuing with this formula. So last year, I think we got roughly, was it $4,000 from CN Rail? Sorry, last year our total levy from CN Rail on 137 acres was, we received $198,000 from CN Rail, correct? So my calculation, if you use that same tonnage rate that's available in every other province, that $198,000 climbs to roughly $10 million.
Okay, that was
is that
your
a fair
last
assumption?
That was your last question.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, that's it. Councillor Ainslie, did you want to speak or just move?
So I'll speak. I'm moving the recommendations. I understand that we can't do anything else because we have a structure here that the province of Ontario has mandated on every municipality in Ontario. I think I will be moving something at the appropriate time because I think we need to be revisiting this, much as we had the discussion earlier where Mayor Tory was quite adamant that we need to be getting properly paid for infrastructure in this province. We have huge infrastructure debt, and to me this is a glaring deficiency. And I was surprised, as I said, I was appointed to the Ontario Good Roads Association. But when we're getting $611 per acre, and you look at any other province, and Alberta was the low end that I used, they received for that same $611, City of Calgary got $50,800 an acre. And with the other thing, the glaring issue that I saw in the report that came from the Ontario Good Roads Association is that when railroads were approached in Ontario about this, because the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities are advocating for this, the railroads that carry the freight in Ontario said that same process in Ontario, done in every other province, is too cumbersome for the railroads to try and figure out and deliver. I think we have a huge issue here. I think there's an opportunity that the City of Toronto needs to address. As I said later, I'll be bringing this forward because I think we need to stand with the northern municipalities that receive about 1/5 of the rate that we do. And there's a huge opportunity here that the province needs to address to help us fund our infrastructure gap. Thank you.
Thank you. On the item, all in favor? Carried. EX 20, on page 3, EX 2629, the operating variance report. Councillor Perks, you held the item down. Do you have questions?
You know what, Speaker? I understand that Mr. Rossini is going to come to one more council meeting, so I'll save it for that meeting.
So, Councillor Perks, you'll just release it
Just
then?
release it.
Okay. On favor? Carried. Page 4, EX 2633, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Fletcher. Transportation Services, 2017 capital budget. No? Okay. Does anybody have any questions on it? No? On the item, on favor? Carried. Thank you, that was fast. So, page 4, civic appointment, CA 17.1. Councillor Perruzza, you held it down. It's appointment of the public member to TTC board. There's a confidential report. Do we need to go in camera on that one? Councillor Perruzza?
I've since spoken with the with staff, and I'm fine. I'm happy to let it go.
So you're releasing it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. This is on page 4, CA 17.1. Is everyone okay with it? We'll just release it. It's on the board. On favor? Carried. On page 4, CD 21.1. Councillor Ainsley, you held the item down. Towards an action plan for transgender youth.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The only question I had for staff was at the same one I had at the committee level. I'd asked for a list of agencies and groups that have been consulted in the plan and that would, in this draft, I understood it was going to be put in this report for council and then included in the final one.
Through the speaker, we can get that list for you. We did not revise the report for council.
Okay, but we can have that list of all the groups that are consulted in the formulation of this plan.
Absolutely, we will put that list together and get it to you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? Okay, Councillor Ainsley, you want to speak?
Sure. Just briefly, I want to thank staff for all the work they've done on this plan, and I think it's long overdue. One of the concerns that I had at the committee when I was there and I questioned staff was trying to understand the groups and organizations that have been consulted in it. There was another concern I had about how the transgender youth were being reached out to in the local communities, in particular Scarborough in Ward 43, where I represent. I was invited to the East Side Pride celebration at the beginning of Pride Month, where we did the 4th annual flag raising. There was no city staff there, unfortunately. I was the only city councillor present, and I did hear from a number of the youth who were present at the event about the lack of services that they saw for transgender youth in Scarborough. They're very appreciative of this report coming forward, but they're hoping there will be more outreach in Scarborough in particular, because there's services that need to be utilized for the youth there. And I want to thank staff for all their hard work on this, and I'll be supporting the recommendations, as I hope everyone else will.
Thank you. On the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Layton, please. Councillor Davis, we need your vote, please.
Councillor Crawford, please.
The item carries unanimously, 38 in favor.
Page 4, CD 21.6, the lease agreement on the community centers. Councillor DeGiorgio held it down. Is Councillor DeGiorgio in this afternoon? Is he around? Does anybody have any questions? Well, no, but this is, we're following the agenda. These are not quick items. These are not releases. No, but no, we're following the agenda now. This is only on items that are held down and that on the third day. But this is items that we're dealing with on the agenda. We're not doing quick releases.
Was that in his ward, there have been a number of pool closures, and his constituents are left with without a place because apparently the recreation department has decided not to do programming at Nelson Boylan Secondary School, which we understand is closed now, and it's in limbo because the Catholic School Board hasn't put forward an offer to buy.
So I do have questions to staff?
That was it.
Okay.
That was a question. Okay. Through the speaker, there has been in Councillor DeGiorgio's ward, Nelson Boylan School, which is currently in likely a process of disposition from the public board to the Catholic board. And so the school is currently closed without any swimming programs going on there. We have communicated to the TCDSB that once they acquire the school and the property, that we would be interested in operating the pool at that time. So we're hoping it's not a permanent closure, and we're certainly in discussions with the Catholic School Board to use that site again. Can our staff, speaker, go in there and carry out during the summer some swim programs for the local kids? Through the Speaker, they cannot. The school is currently closed. There are no staff in the building, and under the jurisdiction of the Toronto District School Board and their own collective agreements and staffing arrangements.
And the situation at York Memorial, what is that?
So that there's the Centennial Recreation Center, or the Centennial Pool, which was part of the 2017 budget process, is less than half a kilometer away from the New York Community Center, and that school was, many of those programs transferred to the York Community Center.
Yes, and Councillor DiGiorgio's point is that it's impossible for the majority of his constituents to access the new community center because it's a free program, and people who are willing to pay for and able to pay for programming have no resource left.
So through the Speaker, we've added with this new community center and this new pool over 5,000 new spots in swimming lessons. So the actual amount of service in this direct community is substantially more than it has been in the past.
So can we have an undertaking from your staff that Nelson Boylan will be seriously looked at once the Catholic Board purchase it? Is it sure? Are we sure that they're going to purchase it?
It's work that we are continuing and are in discussions with the Catholic Board about currently.
And maybe you can move that motion if you want to speak on behalf of Councillor Frank DiGiorgio. Okay, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, do you have questions?
What was the staff recommendation in this report? Was it to receive the report for information?
The staff recommendation of the report was to receive it for information, and then there were a number of motions that were brought forward by Community Development and Recreation Committee.
So the committee, recommendation is different.
That's correct.
So can you explain to me what the committee wanted as opposed to receive for information is obvious, just receive but I'm not sure what the committee what that does, what the committee recommendation does.
So through the Speaker, the staff recommendation was to receive for information.
Madam Chair, I really would like to hear this.
Please, councillors, Councillor Perks, Councillor DiCiano. Thank you.
The Community Development and Recreation Committee requested that City Council direct the Executive Director of Social Development, Finance and Administration to include swimming pools in the proposed community use asset utilization model being considered by the City School Board's Advisory Committee.
What does that mean?
That means, through the Speaker, there is a model that is used when the city assesses surplus schools that are distributed for consideration for acquisition by the city.
Sorry, say that again.
So there's a model that the city uses to assess surplus school properties and whether the city should have an interest in acquiring those properties. And this motion asks us to consider pools as one of the criteria in that model.
When a school is declared surplus, whether we should purchase it or not. That's all this does.
That's correct. So if as an example, a school came up on the surplus list, one of the things that we would consider is if there was a city-run pool in that school and the other services around it, in consideration of whether we needed the pool.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
We're making use of 26 TDSB schools. Our annual payment to the TDSB is $5.6 million, but the report says that the 2017 budget is $9 million. Why is that?
So through the Speaker, the difference, it's $5.6 million for the pool agreement we have with the Toronto District School Board, and the remainder to the $9 million number is for the exclusive use agreement as well as permitting that we do of these schools that is charged on an hourly basis.
So, okay, so the outflow of cash to operate these 26 pools is just over $9 million.
The outflow for the pool portion of that total $9 million is approximately $5.6 million.
Okay.
The remainder is for non-school space, such as gymnasiums, classrooms, and for regular non-aquatic programs.
Oh, I see. Okay. And on the so for the pool programs, does that operate on a break-even basis, or what, I mean, because we run classes and so on. Is that a break-even basis, or?
Through the Speaker, the agreement with the school board, and this is the second or third rendition of it, calls for the city to pay 100% operating costs of the pool in that school, 24/7, 12 months of the year, and to access that pool after 6 weekdays on weekends and throughout the summer.
So then how much revenue do we take in from the parks and recreation programs that we run through these pools?
Through the Speaker, I don't have a figure for you per se. I can say that in pools and programs where we have fees charged, for the most part, the cost of the program is the direct operating cost of that program is cost recovery. In certain cases, when we don't charge fees, obviously there's a higher cost to those programs.
So now the current agreement expires in June 2017. This was a 5-year term. And are we doing, now is there a 2-year extension that we've just entered into now?
Through the Speaker, that's correct. We have, through delegated authority of extending the agreement, had an agreement with the Toronto District School Board to extend the agreement for 2 years while we take some time to look at all of those properties, the long-term plan that the TDSB has around a variety of different schools, and pen then a 10-year agreement at the end of that 2-year period.
Now, why would we look at a 10-year agreement? Because I would assume that the capital costs of these pools might put some of them in jeopardy for future use, unless that capital cost is covered by the provincial government.
Through the Speaker, that is exactly correct. We want to do, and the TDSB has committed to doing a capital assessment of these properties and these pools.
And okay, so then pending the outcome of that assessment of the capital costs, because I know the school board doesn't really have the money to pay for those pools for the ongoing capital maintenance, we will then look at doing an agreement and how will it be determined, you know, how many of these pools will be left open?
Well, through the Speaker, and as we've spoken about many times, there are many of the pools that we're using currently, the 26 pools, we have a requirement to deliver our aquatic program. We don't have city-owned pools to help deliver those programs. So part of the service planning that we're doing is trying to assess how long we can rely on those pools to continue delivering our programming within that 10-year period, so we can do our own capital planning around our needs in the long term.
So is it possible that the city might make a capital contribution to some of those pools in parts of the city where we do not have our own facility?
Certainly hasn't been ruled out. That's not the arrangement that we have right now, but that would be one of the things to consider in that 10-year strategy. Okay,
and so last question, when do you expect this to conclude?
The 10-year strategy?
No, when do you expect, so right now we've got a 2-year extension, but you're working on a longer-term agreement. When do we expect that longer-term agreement will be concluded?
We would hope for that longer-term agreement to be complete a year from now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Madam Speaker, question for staff. So in the 2018 budget process last year, we removed, you recommended and City Council supported removing funding for 3 particular pools. Can you just name those 3 pools again, just a reminder, and how much money?
That's correct. The 3 pools are Don Mills Collegiate Institute for a total cost of $172,000 annually. The Centennial Recreation Center, which is referred to as York Memorial Secondary School, for a total cost of, on the next page, $209,000 annually. And the S.H. Armstrong Pool, which is at the Duke of Connaught Public School, for a total cost of $143,000 annually.
Thank you. And the decision that is before us that the committee did, does this change any of the recommendations or decisions on the funding of these pools? Does it change any that decision we had made previously, or potentially change in the future?
So the decision that is in this particular item does not.
Okay.
It does not make any changes to the existing agreements. There are other items before council which may.
Okay, so in the future, when this report comes back, what would it suggest, bringing the funding back to any of these pools or not, or you don't know at this point?
I'm sorry, Councillor, can you repeat it? I couldn't hear.
So when you bring this report back through this, the City School Advisories Committee, could it make recommendations in the future that would support supporting funding in any of these schools?
It's hard to say at this point through the speaker. The advisory committee would be looking at the high-level pieces. It wouldn't necessarily be looking at the decisions that council has already made and the recommendations we made within that budget, which were based on the current usage of those pools.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're recessed to 6:30.